Our collective ancestors throughout history saw the eclipses as celestial events that disrupted the natural order of things. Some of our ancestors believed this was a time to be quiet, to pray, to meditate, to honor the ancestors, while others, like from my culture, believed this was a time to make noise and bang drums to ward off evil energy. But the common theme was that it was a time of fated endings and beginnings, and it was a time to allow nature to realign itself. So with every death, there was an eventual rebirth. And we kind of saw this with the lunar eclipse that happened in the sign of Pisces on September 7th, and that's when all of this chaotic energy really started to ramp up. In this video, I'm going to talk about the spiritual nature of a solar eclipse, since the next eclipse we're going to have is on September 21st. It is a solar eclipse in the sign of Virgo at 29 degrees, which in astrology is called the anaretic degree. It's the final degree, which symbolizes an ending of some sort. And even though technically this is a new moon, it's a south node eclipse, and so it symbolizes some sort of purging and release that needs to happen in order for this new beginning to happen. When I was doing the research on solar eclipses, and I took lots of notes, the common theme across cultures throughout history is that this was a time to be in alignment with nature and allow the natural cycles of death and rebirth to happen. And I know death is a scary topic for people in the West, but the matter of fact is that death is a part of life. We're all going to die. We just don't know when. And it's not only people, but animals also know instinctively the moment of totality, because I found this article. These scientists studied colonial orb web spiders during the solar eclipse, and they observed that these spiders would take down their webs on the day of totality, and then after the solar eclipse, they would rebuild them. It was a solar eclipse that Nat Turner saw on February 12th, 1831. It was a solar eclipse in the sign of Aquarius. It was also a south node eclipse, however, it was in the sign of Pisces. So a solar eclipse happens when the moon goes between the earth and the sun. So that's why the dark of the moon covers the sun. And Nat Turner interpreted that as a black man's hand covering the sun. Now, in order for him to get to this symbolism, he learned how to read at a very young age, and he read the Bible, and he was like, wait a minute, Christianity is actually not in alignment with enslaving people. And so he was very religious. He believed in God. And so when he saw that solar eclipse, he took that as a sign from God that he needed to lead his people to freedom. He was sick, and he couldn't end up leading this rebellion, which was the most successful slave rebellion in American history, until August 21st, 1831, which was in between eclipses like we are now. It was during eclipse season. What I do find interesting is that he led this rebellion 2 days before a lunar eclipse in Aquarius at 29 degrees, at the anaretic degree. Nat Turner is not the only one who used the stars for guidance. Harriet Tubman is another famous sky watcher. She read the constellations and used them as a map to guide her people with the Underground Railroad. Even though Nat Turner's rebellion was short-lived, it was successful in the sense that it scared the slave owners, the slave masters, so much that the Virginia General Assembly passed a law to make it illegal essentially for enslaved Black people to read or write, and they couldn't assemble in church without a white minister. I don't know if most of y'all know this part, but when they executed Nat Turner, they ate him. And they call them the civilized ones. Anyway, on August 31st, 1932, there was a solar eclipse in the sign of Virgo. So it's essentially the same eclipse we're going to experience on the 21st. That inspired Frida Kahlo's, one of Frida Kahlo's most famous paintings. It's her self-portrait on the borderline of the United States and Mexico. And her husband at the time, Diego Rivera, were in Detroit because he was painting a mural for the DIA. This is a picture of them observing the solar eclipse. Callow and Rivera, who had socialist ideals, were alarmed by Detroit's stark poverty, even as they were being catered to by the local elites. The Mexican artists were both aware the city's Mexican population was being decimated by often illegal deportations. Callow used the eclipse's dual nature as a way to make a statement about the polarizing era she lived in, along with her own loneliness. If we look at this side, this is the United States, which is having its own Industrial Revolution moment, and this is her ancestral lands of Mexico. At the time, she was recovering from a miscarriage, so there's all this symbolism around fertility and death, and that's essentially what an eclipse is. This was me during last year's eclipse on April 8th, 2024. It was a solar eclipse in the sign of Aries, and I traveled to Rochester, New York to be in the path of totality, and I just remember being in like broad daylight and all of a sudden it turning pitch black. It was the wildest experience of my life. I hope you take some time on the solar eclipse to pray, meditate, and to receive the divine downloads.